A Texas man spotted an armadillo on his property in 2015 and quickly grabbed his .38 revolver to deal with it. Because gunfire is the only rational way to get rid of an armadillo. He took aim, fired 3 times, and was struck in the noggin by his own bullet after it ricocheted off the critter's shell. Luckily for him, the bullet struck his jaw, and though the injuries were minor, I doubt he'll be rushing into another showdown against one of these animals anytime soon.
Hold it right there!
That's a story I like to call the Karmadillo, but it's just the very beginning of our journey into a ton of insanely satisfying times karma came for awful people. Let's go. Some people are jerks out of anger or vengeance, but some are just jerks for the sake of it, like people who smash up strangers' innocent snowmen. But in Kentucky in January 2019, one such snowman fought back. After a homeowner returned to his house to see tire marks parting the snow in his front yard, it didn't take him long to work out what had occurred in his absence. A car had purposefully driven into his yard and attempted to knock down the 9-foot-tall snowman he'd constructed earlier that day. But what the driver didn't realize until it was too late was that the homeowner had used a thick tree stump as the base of the snowman.
Oh no!
The driver had likely crashed straight into the trunk, doing more damage to their vehicle than to the snowman. The snow giant, on the other hand, stood strong and proud as the car drove away, broken and embarrassed. Moving on to something with more of a criminal edge, occasionally the punishment fits the crime in the most delightful ways. This was exactly the case for a Kansas man named Lawrence Ripple, who robbed a bank in 2017. After the bank teller handed over the cash during the robbery, Lawrence waited politely in the lobby for the police to arrive and put up little resistance when they did. Only when the police interviewed the robber's wife did they find out why he'd been so cooperative. It turned out Lawrence had revealed his crime plans to his wife, telling her he'd rather be in jail than at home with her. The whole fiasco had been an attempt to get away from his wife, and once he'd been put through the court system, karma had been truly served. His sentence? 6 months house arrest. Plenty of time to make it up to his beloved wife. Up next, in a case of more instantaneous karma, we see a dashcam owner pull into the left lane, which appears to be clear to avoid a buildup of traffic. Unfortunately, another vehicle is speeding way over the limit, too fast to be initially noticed by the dashcam user. The speeding car behind has to brake, much to his annoyance. So much so, he pulls up in front of the camera owner and climbs out, ready to rumble. But the moment he steps out, he realizes his error. A cop has seen the whole thing and is pulling up directly behind.
Not on my watch!
Despite a hilariously feeble attempt to point the blame on the dashcam user as a justification for the recklessness and seeming threat of violence, there's no way out of this one, and he ended up with a ticket. Leaving a dog locked up in a car is a surefire way to generate yourself some bad karma. Even with a window cracked, cars can quickly heat up and can become death traps for poor, unattended pooches. And as you'll see, there are other reasons it's a bad idea. Apparently, one car-bound pup wanted to make a protest against its temporary car park abandonment by its owners. A dirty protest, that is. Behold in all its glory. I call it Doggo's Dashboard Dookie. I can't help wondering how long it took the owner to notice. And more so, what if the phantom poop rolled into the AC? Perhaps that's exactly the kind of air blast these people deserve. Our next case of karma and action from 2012 involved a young man with a deadly penchant for stop signs. Tyler A. Myers of Norwalk, Connecticut, was driving around one night making other drivers' lives slightly more dangerous, but not by drunken or reckless driving. He'd been stealing stop signs and had amassed quite the collection in the back of his pickup truck from his night's adventure. But for every stop sign he stole, it seems he ignored many others, driving straight past them without any regard for their purpose. If he stopped at one sign in particular, whether to obey it or just to steal it, it would have been the best choice he ever made. But instead, he chose to drive straight out, past that one stop sign, right into the path of an oncoming truck. Unable to stop, the truck T-boned him, and with his seatbelt unfastened, Myers expired then and there. He lived by the stop sign, and he died by the stop sign. When a Reddit user's estranged half-brother re-entered his life after many years apart from his family, he initially assumed his half-brother's motives were good ones. After all, their father was dying of Alzheimer's, and the Redditor's half-brother had chosen to quit his job to take on full-time care of their ailing parent. But the true motives became clear when the Redditor's half-brother usurped financial authority on behalf of their father and began channeling their dying parents' funds into his own account. He cleaned out their father's $3,000 savings completely, and their dad died shortly after. But when the Redditor's mom, who was the half-brother's stepmom, also passed away a couple years later, karma finally kicked in for the thieving usurper. It turned out the Redditor's mom had originally intended to leave her stepson $125,000 in her will, but she wrote him out entirely after his thieving actions were discovered. So, by stealing that $3,000, he lost out on $750,000. The Redditor, meanwhile, received a tidy $250,000, including the $125,000 originally intended for his half-brother.
Nice.
If you're loving this karma-tastic video so far, head over to our official store via the link on screen and get yourself some Karma merch. We've got this incredibly crafted poster we call Karma Town, with dozens of high-quality illustrations from our Karma series. With countless Easter eggs, you'll notice something new every time you look at it. And this Karmadillo t-shirt is honestly one of my favorite pieces of merch of all time, available in 3 color variants. Grab them now while stocks last. When Reddit user Nico12995 was driving along one day, his heart skipped a beat when he noticed a car pulling out of a junction dangerously close up ahead. So he slammed on the brakes and prepared for the worst. There was a bang, but Nico's car seemed relatively unscathed. He pulled a U-turn, hoping to exchange details with the other driver, only to see the guilty party speeding off down the road. Upon inspecting the damage to his own car, Nico noticed something had been wedged into his door. With a little force, he bent the object back, revealing it to be the license plate of the hidden runner. Slowly, it began to make sense. When the other car had pulled out, Nico's car had grazed the front, picking up the license plate as he went. Needless to say, tracking down the dangerous driver became a lot easier with that handy bit of unexpected evidence. Have you ever had to deal with a jackass misusing their high beams while driving at night? It's unbelievably annoying, not to mention dangerous. But don't worry, I've got something that'll soothe the rage burning inside you at the thought of it. This fella found a way to fight fire with fire. Bright enough for you, boys? Hopefully they learned a lesson from this dude's modded light system. Once their vision eventually returned, that is. We've all sent or received an annoying New Year's Eve text or two. But I'm willing to bet that even your most embarrassing New Year's Eve text confession didn't cause as much damage as the one received by a Russian terrorist in 2011. The woman had planned to make her way to Moscow's Red Square with an explosive vest, which she would have her partner remote detonate, causing untold devastation to New Year's revelers. The vest had been rigged to be activated by a single text from her partner, which was a measure to ensure she would have to go through with it even if she had a change of heart. But luckily, a change of heart would never be an option. You see, while she was preparing to leave her safe house, she received a Happy New Year text from her cell phone's service provider.
Oh no!
The well-meaning text triggered her vest, prematurely ending her wannabe reign of terror instantly, without harming anyone else. Turns out phone service providers can do some good every once in a while, but only by accident. Sometimes it falls to the public to administer justice on the small scale, and the punishments people come up with have no end of creativity. Nothing exemplifies this more than one Chinese street sweeper who grew sick of a particular driver making his job difficult by parking illegally in a spot that obstructed his work. As revenge, the sweeper surrounded the driver's car in 42 heavy, filled to the brim trash cans. Getting that car free would be no easy feat, and the whole thing was sure to kick up a stink for that inconsiderate owner.
Ew, what that smell?
In November 2019, 82-year-old woman Willie Murphy was preparing for bed when a man started banging loudly on her door asking to let him in. When she refused, he began ramming his way through the front door, eventually breaking in. But little did he know, the elderly lady waiting inside was an award-winning bodybuilder and a trained fighter. She clobbered the intruder using a table, and when that broke, she clubbed him into submission with the metal table legs. By the time she was done, he was more than ready to leave. Unfortunately for him, the police arrived as he was staggering out, and the dazed criminal was hauled away to jail. In Willie's own words, "She really did a number on that man. Where do I sign up for a personal grandma bodyguard?" This next example of karma is short, simple, and sweet. In 2020, a raging trash hole of a man attempted to throw a shopping cart at a Walmart employee. Through stupidity and unbelievable physical ineptitude, this is how that same man ended up. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my nominee for Idiot of the Decade. Makes you proud to be an American, doesn't it? Now for the infamous case of Maximilien Robespierre. You may already be aware that during the French Revolution, the newly invented guillotine was up and down more than a Parisian courtesan's breeches. This was due in no small part to the strong advocacy for execution from prominent individuals during and after the Revolution, for which only the highly efficient guillotine could meet the demands. One individual, Monsieur Robespierre, was particularly fond of sending his perceived political opponents to the block during the Reign of Terror. But his strong lust for clean cuts was soon turned around on him, and his own neck ended up on the chopping block when the chaotic tides of the revolution turned against him. And here's an extra unnerving tidbit. While most folks experiencing the guillotine treatment would be given the dignity of facing the ground, Robespierre was reportedly forced to face up at the blade. The folks manning the mechanism were also told to have performed a few false starts on purpose, just to increase the torment before the final drop. Cruel, sure, but deserved? I'll leave that up to you. Moving on to something much more modern, a Reddit user's wife captured some instant dashcam karma while waiting at a junction. Up ahead, a pickup can be seen veering around a car which has begun to stop for the red light. Apparently, red lights don't apply to pickup drivers. But what Speedy Gonzalez didn't notice was the police car merely 2 cars behind him. Really gives you hope, doesn't it? The open road can seem pretty devoid of justice most of the time, but that only makes it sweeter when you finally witness jackasses on the road getting the karma treatment. Like the driver of the white car here, who clearly thought he owned the roads around Fort Lauderdale with how much he was barging across the lanes. But this was one car he shouldn't have cut off. Ah, the perfectly timed undercover cop reveal. It never gets old. For a burglar, avoiding being seen is essential. But when the resident of the targeted home up next was startled by the sound of breaking glass, he stealthily snuck his phone out of an upstairs window to capture the source of the commotion. To the man's surprise, he discovered a crowbar-wielding home invader struggling to crack open their front door. Unbeknownst to the burglar, the legal evidence needed to put him away was already being collected by the occupant of the house he'd assumed to be empty. Before long, the police arrived and took the thief away in some much-needed karmic satisfaction to anyone who's ever been robbed. I'm no criminal mastermind, but I think it's fair to say that bank robberies turn out best when your identity remains hidden. A robber in Cleveland, Ohio, seems not to play by those rules, however, as anonymity seemed pretty low on his priority list. For one thing, he entered the Cleveland bank without a mask, in plain sight of the CCTV. But stupidity cemented his failure when he handed over his demand note to the bank teller. The baffled teller noticed that the paper the robber used was a personal document from the Ohio Bureau of Motor Vehicles and was complete with his name and address.
You serious?
The note, which he left at the scene, paired nicely with the CCTV footage, and he was soon arrested. I'm sure the police were kind to him, though. He did the hard work for them, after all. In April 2018, in Widnes, England, a couple of bored young men began pestering passers-by with coins from the safety of their first-floor council flat balcony. But when another couple of gentlemen visiting the town caught wind of the anti-social activities taking place, they thought up the perfect form of vigilante justice. Caught on camera, with the aim of world-class professionals, the Knights of Karma begin launching eggs at the gormless troublemakers. After a series of near misses, the balcony bandits make a dishonorable retreat, but not before one of the vigilantes unleashes the shot of a lifetime, curving the egg around the closing door for one final eggy impact. Instant justice. Best served sunny side up. Now, we briefly return to another of my favorite karma varieties, road rage retribution. When a disagreement at a stoplight in Atlanta escalated, one unfortunate driver, or at least their car door, found themselves at the mercy of a rage-fueled confrontation. Not sure how helpful taking pictures of the license plates on a car you just carried out criminal damage upon is going to be, buddy, but it didn't matter anyway, because soon, this happened.
You just broke the door. Oh, wow. What hands behind your goddamn back, boy? And we got the, oh shit, we got the now, we got weed in the car. Oh, yeah.
A quick, clean shutdown of the situation. Nice work, Mr. Perfectly Timed Cop. Sometimes karma is the best crime deterrent of all. When a young car thief in Durham, England, attempted to break the window of a parked vehicle, the thrown brick bounced off the glass, clipping him directly in the face. Seems he received karma's message as he sauntered off to rethink his awful choices. If you ever feel a desperate need to relieve yourself in public, what you definitely shouldn't do is take a leak on a police vehicle. But the drunken man in this clip not only turns a cop car into a DIY urinal, he does it right in front of a policeman. When he fails to spot the officer on his rapid approach, a last-minute escape attempt goes just about as well as you'd expect.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
Classic fool.
Hopefully, a night in a cell will teach him that making a quick getaway kinda depends on you not being too drunk to run. By contrast, other folks have taken justice for street peers into their own hands in hilarious ways. Like the homeowners in this next clip, who were sick of constantly finding a puddle of pee by their front door. Check out how they taught one urinator a valuable lesson about looking up. Perfect. You splash my porch, I splash your whole body. Fair trade, I'd say. Let's keep things spray-related, but in a very different way, with this next karma story. Protests and demonstrations may cause a few inconveniences here and there, but they're an important part of a democratic society. In March 2019, protesters in Sofia, Bulgaria, were demonstrating in hopes of achieving a more direct democracy in their country, when police opened fire with pepper spray. Hoping to suppress the crowds with the spray, which is jam-packed with capsaicin, the chemical that gives chili peppers their heat, the Bulgarian police gave little thought to the wind direction. Though only one officer unleashed the spray, he did so over the shoulders of his colleagues and against the wind. As you might expect, the excruciating mist was blown back into the eyes of several of his workmates, incapacitating them in pure agony. Sometimes those who accumulate bad karma are able to redeem themselves. That's exactly what happened in August 2019 when a self-proclaimed awful person, in the heat of out-of-character rebellion, stole a bottle of ketchup from a restaurant. No one was any the wiser until the restaurant servers found a note left there a few weeks later. The note confessed to the heinous crime and detailed how, ever since the act was committed, the thief had been plagued with exceptional bad luck. Hours after stealing the ketchup, someone had crashed into their car and countless other disasters followed. So, by providing the restaurant with a ketchup bottle, plus an extra one for good measure, they hoped they'd be able to rebalance the karmic scales. It worked. The note was shared online and went viral. Within a few days, Heinz's official Twitter account had caught wind of the story and launched a search for the ketchup thief. But once they found them, they not only publicly forgave them, they also helped pay for the repairs to the good-natured thief's car. Now that's the kind of good PR I can get behind. One of the most satisfying things a driver can experience is seeing an overly impatient motorist get their comeuppance. That satisfaction was undoubtedly savored by the dashcam owner in this clip, which shows a couple of self-serving motorists taking a shortcut up the wrong side of the road. Their attempts to skip traffic don't get them far, though, as they instantly encounter a comically long stream of motorcycle-riding police officers who look none too happy with the traffic jumpers. All aboard the Karma Convoy. When police in Laverton, Australia were called to a crime scene in 2016, it was immediately obvious that the criminals had already been duly punished. A tour bus driver had returned to his vehicle, noticing what seemed to be a fuel cap on the road, evidence that people had tried to siphon his gas. Typically, fuel thieves will remove the cap, attach the hose to the fuel port, and suck on it to get the fuel flowing on a heist like this. Only on closer inspection, the bus driver discovered that the actual fuel cap was still firmly in place. It was dumbstruck to find, instead, that the cap on the ground had been removed from the bus's sewage tank, and there was a literal spattering of evidence on the ground that, in a short-lived effort, the perpetrators had attempted to suck fuel and instead sucked stool. The officers spotted the signs of a quick getaway after this shameful realization. Needless to say, the police had very little interest in recovering those stolen goods. Karma, you nasty. In 2018, a Florida man's attempt to clear his name in the eyes of the law had the opposite effect. After he was involved in a car crash, Xavier Moran sent his dashcam footage into the police to prove the other car had cut him off, causing the accident. However, on reviewing the files, the sheriff's deputy found some even juicier footage the dashcam had captured earlier. The footage showed Moran breaking into a beauty store and burglarizing the place. He had no idea the camera had been rolling, but that didn't matter. Thanks to his self-submitted evidence, he pinned himself to a totally unrelated crime. Policing doesn't get much easier than that. Let's move on now to a section I like to call the Comment Karma Collection. Here, we bring to life the incredible karmic tales shared by our viewers. Kicking us off, we've got one of the funniest stories I've had the pleasure of reading in my own YouTube comments. Samuel Chick, 88, was driving his 18-wheeler cross country when he heard a fellow trucker broadcasting over the Citizen Band radio. Apparently, some numbskull up ahead had been antagonizing a trucker for miles, positioning their car to intentionally stop the big truck from overtaking slower vehicles. As our viewer got closer to the scene, they saw something truly spectacular. The truck in question was actually transporting a trailer full of cattle, and as the antagonistic car settled its speed alongside the trailer's middle, one of the cows let loose an enormous spray of urine directly into the car's open window. That's perfect. I hope the cow earned its freedom that day because it sure deserved it. A terrible person even more deserving of a beatdown by fate was shared with us by another viewer. The viewer's idiotic at the time boyfriend was a real wild card, or put simply, a straight-up asshole. He decided while driving it'd be smart to throw his glass of whiskey and coffee out of his truck's passenger window at a passing cop. That's right. For once, the fact that someone was drunk driving is actually not the most outrageous part of the story. The cup didn't hit the cop, thankfully, but only because of an incredibly stupid twist in the tale. Much to the cup thrower's surprise, the window had actually been shut. The glass shattered, causing coffee-scented chaos to erupt in the vehicle, during which the dizzy-brained driver lost control. He drove into a ditch, trashing his truck in plain sight of the cop, who obviously pulled over immediately. The idiotic driver attempted to flee, but became embarrassingly tangled in his seatbelt. The officer cuffed him with ease, and he was slapped with several charges, fines, and jail time, alongside a very hefty bill for truck repairs, which, unsurprisingly, his insurance refused to pay out for. Next up, a submission from viewer Roger Hutchison. One night, when Roger's sister, who we'll call Regina, was working her job as a nightclub restroom attendant, she spotted a woman eyeing up her tip jar. In a very swift movement, before Regina could react, the woman snatched up the cash and fled the club. Karma wouldn't be served until later that night, when Regina's shift ended and security outside had something to tell her. He'd heard about the theft and had seen a woman matching the thief's description fleeing the club. Only as she ran, she slipped over in the street. A man had approached, seemingly to help her up, but instead had actually reached into her pocket and stolen the pre-stolen cash. The man ran off in the night, having robbed a robber. Circle of life, I guess. Another viewer submitted a crazy story they recently experienced after they found evidence of a break-in at their workshop. The thief had clearly smashed in through the skylight, stealing tools, materials, and a company van. But karma was not on this criminal's side, intelligence-wise, because they'd also left a parting gift for the folks at the workshop: a bag containing their burglary tools, wallet, and cell phone. With these, it was a breeze for the police to track down the identity and address of the blundering criminal, who just so happened to also have 20 outstanding warrants. What's that? Self-preservation instincts? Never heard of them. Next up, we have an experience shared by viewer Sabriala, who, as a kid, kindly lent another kid a couple of bucks while at the local roller skating rink. Unfortunately, when Sab politely asked her fellow skater when he might be able to give her money back, his response was flipping her off with both hands. Not cool. But, luckily, karma swooped in at that very moment. While flipping the double bird, the roller skater stopped looking where he was going, causing him to veer off into the knee-high seating around the edge of the rink. His legs were swept out, and he flipped over the chairs headfirst into the wall behind. Ah, sweet justice. Some people are so rude their bad attitudes only serve to make their own lives worse. One of our viewers witnessed this when they spotted someone in the street ahead of them drop their phone as they stepped off a bus. The viewer called out, trying to get the person's attention, only to be met with a middle finger and an angry stare. Clearly, this person was too busy to consider a stranger might be doing them a favor. But, unusually in this case, karma seemed so set on teaching that meanie a lesson, it made a Good Samaritan's day worse in the process. How? Well, because when the viewer was on their way to hand the phone into the bus company's lost and found, they slipped on a sheet of ice in the street. The phone flew out of their hand, into the road, directly in the path of an oncoming vehicle. Crunch. One ungrateful piece of work never got their phone back. Karma made sure of that. A tale of slightly more disgusting karmic justice was shared by Pixie Princess 501, who told us about an elderly lady who was robbed in the street while walking her dog. The thief yoinked the plastic bag the lady had been holding and sprinted away. Despite being shaken up, the woman wasn't too upset about what had been stolen, because the bag had only been used to pick up her dog's poop on the walk. Well, Mr. Thief, you get what you deserve. Do you have any crazy instant karma tales of your own to share? Send them across to karma@bmas.com, and I may feature yours with a shout-out next time. If stealing and fencing cars is your main mode of earning cash, and you're not particularly smart, justice is never too far over the horizon. This is well and truly the case for the criminal couple in this video from November 2019. When they find their steal of the night with both front doors conveniently unlocked, they quickly hop in and begin to drive away with ease. There's even a laptop in the back, so it seems their luck is running high.
What? Is it really?
But things get tense when the couple realize they're being followed by a police car and they're forced to skirt off down some side roads.
Please don't let me Jesus Christ.
They park up in a driveway and begin to panic as the cop pulls up behind them and approaches.
For what? I don't know. What are you doing?
Please don't move! Keep your hands up where I can see them!
Okay.
But why is the officer so suspicious of the two? Well, did you consider how this whole encounter was filmed in the first place? The answer is that the thieving couple had stolen themselves a bait car, placed there by the cops for lawless citizens such as themselves. So it's no surprise when the standard excuses didn't work.
Don't move! Keep your hands up! Don't move!
What do we do? What's going on? So we just got a ride here from this guy. Now he just took off.
Yeah, this is a stolen car. This is a bait car.
We didn't know that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for these bright young upstarts, we didn't know. Sorry, won't hold up in court, seeing as the whole theft was caught on camera. Now it's time for a little of my favorite variety of karma, slapstick justice. The fellow you're about to lay eyes on was caught on CCTV vandalizing the front of an art gallery in the Louisiana town of Shreveport, something karma clearly had an issue with. His punishment was swift and simple. Hopefully that knocked some sense into him, but let's be real, probably not. Scooting on to the next story now, while illegally riding his electric scooter along the sidewalk in July 2019, a Chicago resident collided with a pedestrian and sped off without remorse. In the wake of the unusual hit and run, the police were called, and they'd soon tracked down the two-wheeled fiend. However, when the police flashed their lights and siren to get the scooter rider to pull over, a man driving his car mistakenly assumed the signal was for him. The mistaken driver then pulled over to the edge of the road and, not seeing the scooter scoundrel, accidentally struck him down. Indirectly, justice was served to the scooter scoundrel in the form of a lengthy hospital stay, followed by a citation for riding a scooter on the sidewalk. Although I'd say being seen riding a scooter in public is punishment enough. In 2005, a robber found out the hard way that karma can have a real bite to it sometimes. After robbing a couple in the streets of Bloemfontein, South Africa, the criminal took off on foot. Pursued by security guards and disoriented in the night's darkness, he somehow ended up in the Bloemfontein Zoo. Luckily for him, he successfully evaded the security guards. Unluckily for him, he ended up accidentally climbing into the zoo's Bengal tiger's enclosure. The next morning, a visitor to the zoo was traumatized when they spotted the thief, or what was left of him.
May he rest in pieces.
Up next, we've got a real piece of work. This impatient meathead who decides the driving lanes aren't up to his standards and opts for speeding along in the parking lane, getting the middle finger as he does. Fast forward a bit, and he gets held at a set of lights. The cameraman has the great pleasure of seeing red and blue lights appear in the reflection of the car up front. Like we all would, the cameraman chuckles as he passes the reckless driver, who now has a cop car behind him and has descended into an all-encompassing rage, denying any responsibility.
An idiot, man.
Karma served. Some people get their kicks from skydiving or jet skiing, but Matthew Disbro, a security guard from Mesa, Arizona, got his from impersonating a police officer. Disbro decked out his Dodge Charger with a phony police paraphernalia, including a set of blue and red lights. Wearing a police uniform, he would drive around pulling people over to satisfy his bizarre craving for power. One day in July 2018, he set his sights on a yellow Ford Mustang and switched on his red and blues. The car refused to pull over, so Disbro rode alongside its occupants, signaling them to stop. What Disbro didn't realize was that the occupants of the car were actually real undercover cops. They'd noticed his decked-out car and ran the license plate, only to discover it was a civilian vehicle. In turn, the officers activated their own flashing lights, and the right man was finally pulled over and arrested for impersonating a police officer. Police work isn't easy, but it can be when the criminals do the officers' work for them. In what's essentially the opposite of a high-speed pursuit, this footage captured by Ohio officers in July 2019 sees a drunk driver veering on the road. Thankfully, he's not a threat for very long and parks himself right in front of the police by slowly crashing into their bonnet. He takes a moment to realize what's going on, but when he does, his earphones are pulled out and a feeble escape is attempted. I think that's what this is. It could well be a dance move. Either way, he was charged with a DUI, and the police were grateful that he inadvertently made their evening much easier. In this next clip, Redditor Dizzy Desi demonstrates what it means to keep a cool head in the face of dangerous drivers. When cruising along a Texas highway, an impatient driver attempts to force his way into her lane, but soon learns that a bold move like that requires the skills to follow up. Despite initiating the incident, the other driver loses control, while Dizzy Desi stands her ground and expertly maneuvers her vehicle to safety. Miraculously, despite the antagonistic driver spinning out into oncoming traffic, no one was hurt. Hopefully, though, that knuckle-headed driver learned a valuable lesson about trying to intimidate on a busy highway, especially when Dizzy Desi's around. Let's move on to something equally white-knuckle now. Whatever your views on the Iraq War, there's no denying that it was a controversial development in global history and resulted in many casualties. But some members of the U.S. media, before it had even begun, were highly vocal in their support of the invasion of Iraq. One of the strongest pro-invasion voices was that of Michael Kelly, a journalist for the New York Times, Washington Post, and other outlets. His support for the war reached a peak in 2003, when he was shipped off to report on the events firsthand. Now, whether karma is pro-war or anti-war is a pretty hot topic, but it certainly seems to possess a sense of poetic justice. Because you see, Michael Kelly, a very vocal advocate of this conflict, learned a significant lesson about the nature of war. It kills people. And in an ironic twist of fate, this passionately pro-war journalist became the first American reporter to be killed in the Iraq War. Let's keep things controversial now. Even putting the terrors he inflicted upon millions of people aside, life as someone working closely with Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin was one of constant fear of imprisonment or execution. For example, in 1951, a Soviet doctor recommended that Stalin work less and rest more for the good of his health. That doctor was promptly arrested and charged as a spy, suspected of trying to undermine Stalin's authority. With this kind of ultra-suspicious, paranoid treatment waiting for anyone who questioned the strength and well-being of the communist leader, it's not surprising that doctors were afraid to treat Stalin. When Stalin failed to appear from his chambers one morning, so the story goes, his staff and physicians were too fearful to enter and check on him without his permission. By the time someone finally did, he'd been lying on the floor for hours, having suffered a stroke. When the doctors were finally called in, hands shaking with fear, the stroke's effects had already worsened. The dictator died soon afterwards, urine soaked from his loss of bladder control, in a suitably undignified end for a man with so much blood on his hands. His paranoia and love of persecution ultimately cost him his life. If you set fire to a place of religious worship to suit a twisted agenda, you're really asking for a visit from the karma police. One man in Exeter, England, learned this when he tried to burn down a local synagogue in July 2019. He was witnessed pouring gasoline through a smashed window at the scene, after which he threw in a piece of burning paper in hopes of maximum destruction. Destruction came, but not the kind he'd been expecting. The huge blast exploded out of the window, severely burning the man's face, hair, and hands, and leaving his head smoking. Though he did do $30,000 of damage to the synagogue, at least the police search would have been relatively easy. Suspect may be missing eyebrows and lashes. When police eventually caught the pyromaniac, he was ordered into confinement at a mental hospital for an unlimited amount of time. Hopefully enough time to think about what he did and for his brows to grow back. No matter how bad your worst job interview was, this next candidate takes the karma cake. When candidate recruiter Matt Buckland was rudely barged out of the way and told to go himself on the tube to work, he brushed off the aggressive encounter and went on with his day. He certainly didn't expect that once he reached his office and sat down to interview a potential new employee, he would find that same antagonistic commuter sat smiling politely across from him. Needless to say, that particular candidate didn't get the job. He did, however, get a healthy dose of karma. If that wasn't enough work-related hijinks for you, in 2015, agriculture expert Sean Sparling was able to lay down the law of karma himself in a hugely satisfying twist of fate. While parking up at his office, he was patiently awaiting someone pulling out of a parking spot so he could slot in, when a rude jerk cruised past and stole the spot for himself. Sean voiced his annoyance, only to be told to f off by the person in the car. Sean was fuming until, shortly afterwards, the very same man arrived at Sean's office for a job interview with Sean. Must have been the easiest no of all time. In the immortal words of Shrek, better out than in, right? Well, not when you decide to pee outside a busy train station in broad daylight as dozens of commuters pass by. This weak-bladdered, disrespectful individual gained Twitter attention for doing just that in July 2019. British Transport Police not only banned him from travel, they also made him mop up his mess. In 2018, a group of poachers met a grisly end while hunting lions in the Sibuya Game Reserve in South Africa. Poaching is highly illegal in the area, but the legal system won't be administering the punishment this time. When the park's anti-poaching dogs drew their handlers' attention to an area of the park that homed a pride of lions one Monday morning, he'd expected to see poachers in the act. What he found, however, were a mismatch of shoes, gloves, hunting rifles, axes, and most significantly, a skull and a chunk of pelvis. It was clear that hunters had been overwhelmed and completely devoured by the lions. Not every poacher gets their comeuppance, but these South Africans got the lion's share. One surfer in California experienced some very satisfying karmic justice after returning to his pickup truck post-surfing. He was surprised to find the gas can he kept in the back was empty, despite being full when he left it. But he didn't mind. In fact, he found it hilarious, because whoever had helped themselves to the can to fill their own vehicle up was sure to be very unhappy indeed, because our surfer hadn't been storing gasoline in the container. He'd been keeping salt water in there for his fish tank back home. Now, I'm no mechanic, but I'm pretty confident in saying salt water isn't what you want to be pouring in your car's fuel tank. Rusty engines, my favorite. Hey, if you enjoyed this Karma Story mega collection, you'll love our Extreme Revenge series. Check it out via the on-screen link right now. And as always, thanks so much for watching. Later, Karma Fiends.